Welcome to another episode of Turning the Table, sponsored by Benchmark 60. Turning the Table is the most progressive weekly videocast for today's food and beverage industry, featuring staff-centric operating solutions for restaurants in the hashtag New Hospitality Culture. My name is Adam Lamb, and I'm a career coach for chefs and hospitality professionals at cheflifecoaching.com. And we have my co-host, Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60. Welcome, Jim.
Morning, or afternoon, I guess. I feel like it's time. West Coast morning, East Coast good afternoon.
Good day to you, sir.
Yeah.
This is episode 125, the Hospitality Development Gap, with our very special guest, Lauren Fernandez of Full Course. You'll want to stick around because Lauren will reveal the 3 ways that you can use to close the development gap in your operation, which, Jim, we've talked about this on end. And so I know that there's going to be some really juicy takeaways from this.
Yeah.
This hashtag Lunchbox live stream is broadcast every week on Thursday at 12 noon Eastern time on Turning the Table podcast page on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and the Chef Life Coach page on Facebook. You can catch the audio-only podcast version everywhere you get your podcast in one day. We ask that you share the show with someone you care about who can find this information useful. Please leave a review on iTunes or Spotify. It really helps others find the show. And you can catch that audio portion at turningthetable.podcast.com/listen. As always, links to the videos and other things discussed in the show can be found in the comments and show notes. And I will do a complete recap and post tomorrow with some bonus content from this episode that will be exclusive to those folks who sign up for our email list. And I just wanted to quickly bring Lauren in. Lauren, welcome.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Just wanted to quickly mention that you and your team at Full Course were just named to the nation's Restaurant News 2022 Power List, a list of 50 emerging leaders from across the restaurant industry who have big ideas, determination, and hustle, but also the runway ahead of them to make their mark on their companies, their colleagues, and the industry. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What does that mean?
I feel like we got a high five for being a little bit disruptive and sharing a lot of love with our industry. We are definitely here to build it back better. And a hallmark of Full Course's investment strategy is to invest in people. And that starts with our education through our nonprofit foundation and is true through our entire development cycle, even after investment.
Maybe you could give us kind of a thumbnail sketch around like what exactly Full Course is, because it seems like you folks do a lot.
We do. It is a complete solution for restaurateurs and food and beverage companies to grow their brand while staying in control and helping to get the companies to its next level, really, where the company has achieved a certain level of enterprise value that you don't see in the vast majority of restaurants that are out there, right? Because we know that 70% of all restaurant locations are a single location. Mm-hmm. And contrary to what we've all kind of seen is actually they're not all franchised or chain restaurants. Most of them are independently owned and operated. It's 2-to-1 actually, independent to franchised. So there are a number of opportunities out there to help people achieve more value for their brand through very strategic growth. And that is what Full Course does. We partner with early stage brands. We have a team of experts in product development, franchising, non-traditional development, and also company store development, where we really can help robustly build out these brands so they have multiple channels of revenue, right? They're more financially stable. And in the end, we get a higher valuation for them at exit. And so we have a nonprofit foundation called the Full Course Foundation, which supports the educational initiatives behind training and development of the people behind these brands, starting with the leadership, but going all the way down to back of house, because we want to involve the employees of the brand with this educational initiative. We have a management company that sits in the middle, that supports our investments and our consulting clients with operational expertise, but also development services. So helping brands grow in all of those major channels, which we just discussed. And last but not least, we felt like an important piece of Full Course's initiative was to bring fair and ethical capital into our industry. So we fundraise to specifically invest in these early stage brands before we even put them through our acceleration process. So we are equal parts investor, incubator and accelerator for brands. And we are here to really make a big impact on our industry because one of the things that we focus on are brands that are run by women, minorities, or that are culturally representative. So we really want to make sure that we're setting a place at the table for everybody.
That's amazing, Lauren. And I'm just curious, where do you find fair and equitable capital?
You go and raise it yourself is the answer to that question. Look, I'm an attorney turned restaurant operator turned now private equity fundraiser, apparently is my full-time job. It was very important to me that we have command of the capital and how it was deployed. If you are going to change and level the playing field, you have to make sure that all aspects of the business have that purpose and mission. And so while the fund is a lot more work for us, it's worth it because it allows us to bring investors in who support our mission and purpose. There's a ton of industry clout, executives and experience who value what we're doing and have put their dollars behind it and their reputation and their networks to help us grow this company. And we couldn't do it without them.
One more question before I kick it to Jim. What possessed you to switch gears and go headlong into the hospitality space?
Yeah, so I had, as an attorney, I'm a JD MBA, and I have spent most of my career in product development, which ultimately led me to the general counsel role at Focus Brands. And in that role, I fell in love with restaurants in the industry. I sort of I got the bite, but I really wasn't hooked until after I left Focus. I went to go invest in some restaurants. I wanted to become a franchisee. And I was looking to create, I'm the daughter of an immigrant. Frankly, I had seen all these people just absolutely crush it in our franchise system. And I thought, why can't that be me? So I pushed some chips in, and with a partner through Origin Development Group that we started, we became the owner and operator of 3 Chicken Salad Chick restaurants, which we very quickly grew to 11 units in just 20 months. So when we exited our investment, I had some time to think. I turned 40 and I was like, what am I going to do now, right? But I had the bug, man. I was so hooked. I love development. I love being out in the field and connecting to our teams. I'm such a people person. But I also had some deep experiences through that journey that I realized needed to be solved for our industry on a larger scale. So I spent a year really incubating the idea for Full Course, pressure testing it with people that I trusted, and coming up with a solution that we felt would work. And in the end, it solves 3 main problems that I see. One is many independent operators out there don't understand this playbook for growth and that it has to be in multiple avenues for revenue development. 2, even if you understand that playbook, it's very hard to find fair capital or debt. I tell people all the time, candidly, we are registered as a woman-owned and minority-owned business, and I get offered debt on a daily basis that's north of 18%. That's without checking my credit score, knowing anything about my company. Somehow they think that that's being fair to a woman in minority-owned business is to do me a favor by 18% debt. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, guys. I mean, it's endemic. It's terrible. There's a lot of predatory lending in the space. And the third issue is, let's just assume for a minute you figured out the playbook, you know how to grow, and you figured out how to fund it too. That's awesome. I see it happen every once in a blue moon. The real issue here is it's a very different skill set to develop a brand, especially in these multiple channels, as opposed to operating restaurants best in class. And even if you can do both, I don't recommend it. It nearly killed me. Trust me, I wouldn't try it. So we're here to really kind of plug those gaps. And to me, education and information is the key to doing this. If you can share the playbook, if you can walk as a player coach in their shoes next to them, and you can give them the capital to get the win so they're fully funded and they don't have to sweat it, that's where we're really going to see some change in this industry. Because look, I make no apologies. We are in this to kick out the next generation of restaurant leadership. And it's coming, and it's coming fast, because that's where we really think the future of this industry is.
Jim, I was hoping that you could help kind of frame this conversation based upon a conversation you and I were having a couple weeks ago, just to kind of give context to it, if you would.
Well, first of all, I mean, I kind of chuckled there. Like, I mean, you said you got a high five from, being in that article about 50. I mean, let's give you another one, because there's so much cool stuff going on here, right? I mean, you and I spoke for the first time, I think, about a year ago, and I was, I was impressed then, and based on what you just told us, I mean, you've kind of got it all. It seems like you've got it all covered. So, and I think, Adam and I have talked lots over the last year or so about this concept of, new hospitality culture, about the new normal of restaurants, about, something that I speak about a lot, which is, improving the career experience for the next generation of restaurant operator. So, there's so much alignment there. I just think what you're doing is amazing. But, Adam, to what you were saying, we had a good discussion, Lauren. We mentioned this a little bit to you earlier, but we had a good discussion a few weeks ago about this development gap that exists in hospitality right now. And whether it's based on tradition of how, people move their way up through the industry, whether it's based on, the investment side of things, where there are a lot of people that, might have some capital and say, I want to get into the restaurant business, but may not have done it before. Or there's this, this bit of a challenge that exists right now based on at least what we say is coming out of the end of this pandemic, or the tail end of the pandemic, where the development and the skill set that people would have learned from years of experience in hospitality is different now, because they were worried about different things for 3 years in the sort of really core time of, when they would have been learning how to be an operator in a restaurant. So there's this interesting dynamic that's going on right now. I'm curious, I know we want to spend some time talking about that today.
Oh yeah.
So
Look,
I don't know if
let's facts, right? We were down over 1 million jobs. Last year at the start of 22, we were down 1 million. The start of this year, we're down 500,000. One of the things our industry is notorious for is churn, right? We have a really bad problem with retention. We're not good at it, And so you layer on top of that the massive wipe we had and job loss during the pandemic. And then you put people back into these new environments where you're right. Like, maybe the manager only has 2 years of experience, and the bulk of which, as you were saying, like, was, packing food to go during the pandemic, So there's a skill gap, not just at the bottom levels looking to climb up and create careers in our industry, but there's also a skill gap at the top. And that creates a number of issues for us, not just in how we execute and deliver to the consuming public, but I still view that as a major retention issue, because people who do not have the right skills ultimately end up with misaligned jobs where you get that kind of friction, and they're not going to be happy and feel successful and have fulfillment in what they're doing because they lack that kind of skill set. So we got to act fast and act quickly. And that's something that we are doing even within our foundation, to constantly be plugging those holes in the education gaps that we're seeing and responding to them with offerings.
So what is Full Course doing about that? How do you address that issue? Like, let's pick the top of the operational levels, the general manager and up. How are you supporting those people to increase that?
Yeah. So 2 things, right? Because you hit on something earlier, Jim. And I just want to highlight this, because I think it's really foundational to why we designed the products we did to solve this. Okay. So when you are in a restaurant, and let's say you come in as an hourly employee, right? 90% of people's first jobs are in our industry, and we're the 3rd largest employer in the US. So we have a constant, awesome opportunity, a phenomenal chance to change people's lives, even if we only touch them for a moment and we're that first job. But we also have an opportunity to keep them, right? Traditionally, the way that you keep people and you ladder them up in a restaurant from hourly to salaried employees is on the job training, right? But as we indicated, a lot of these managers are missing that kind of passing of the torch and that on the job training, where you are learning from those who came before you what to do, what not to do, how to handle certain situations, et cetera. So the first step that we took was very simple. we recognized that we needed specific leadership training for existing managers. So Full Course has a number of independent courses you can take on your own, but we also do workshops that brand owners or owners can buy to help train their managers. And frankly, let's be honest, let's go deep in the bench. Possible high potential people who could be a manager who are being framed for leadership. So that leadership piece is so critical to what we do. It's something that we offer not only to the consuming public as part of their development within the restaurant, but also within larger brands for them to buy to support their franchisees' development, et cetera. So that's number one. And I can't stress enough. I think that those leadership skills, sometimes they're soft skills, but sometimes they're practical skills, like how to read a P&L and connect your instinct as a manager for what's going on in the restaurant to what you're seeing on the financials. So there's some aspects to the leadership piece, which I think have a higher level of thinking and thought. I think strategic thinking, I'll say that, around the management of the restaurant and the people in the restaurant. I think number two, we're missing some of the beauty of learning from others. And if you can't recreate that within the restaurant, what we can do is pool those resources and those folks who are very highly experienced in operations and share that knowledge in a cohort type situation. So we've developed a program called Navigator. Navigator is a $29 a month monthly subscription coaching service. It's specifically designed for managers and for leaders in the industry. And it's there to help you gut check, right? Remember, when you call another manager from another location, you say, hey, has this ever happened to you? What got subbed for you when we ran out of paper towels? What if, just having that moment where you can do one of these. So there's group coaching, there's monthly webinars, and we interview other operators in the industry to share current techniques and tips and tricks like that, so that we can really give them that missing piece where you might have had learned it on the job before, and now you can learn it in our cohort, which represents brands all over the United States.
Adam, where's your mind going on this? Because mine is going, man, I could have used that when I was blind leading the blind, trying to figure out how to run a restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, this all kind of leads back to the trope about being handed the keys at the end of the night and saying, you ready to close up, man? Because now you're supposedly a lead without any skill training. And, I think I'm on record as saying, currently nobody teaches leadership within the industry. I'm sure there's some culinary schools or management schools that have those topics, but clearly the managers in the field do not have the soft skills in order to manage appropriately. And we see this every day, because the first clue would be, what's your retention rate for associates? I also look back to, if there's nothing else but communication training, like how do you master workplace communication in such a way that the associates feel heard, they feel seen, they're not talked down to. And those are such important soft skills that, again, as someone who came up, off the street in my culinary career, I didn't go to culinary school, although later I went. But I had to go outside the industry in order to get coaching skills, leadership skills, and then come back because I noticed that it wasn't around. So I think, to your point, Lauren, number one, leadership training. Yeah. And the cool thing is that it's ongoing, with cohorts, a group gets together and then there's another group and another group and another group. And it becomes this long-standing, continuous learning curve that they get to use in real world situations, because they get to apply exactly what they learn there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's incredibly important, and thank you for offering that skill. And the other thing that you mentioned right before we got on the show, Lauren, is that this gap does not necessarily exist within independently owned restaurants. It also exists in franchise systems where someone might have one unit, and how the hell do they grow it to 10? Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, look, I am a minority. I'm a diverse franchisee. I was a multi-unit franchisee. And there are a number of impediments that stand in the way of very sophisticated, amazing operators that may exist within your own franchise system already. One of them is, again, access to fair and ethical capital or debt, right? So that's a big issue. And especially when banks pull back on lending on established restaurant brands, it can be really tough, right, to self-fund out of cash flows. So one of the things we need to consider is if you are truly invested as a brand in growing your diverse and minority franchisees, you have to kind of lower some of the barriers to entry. And I'm not suggesting you give anyone a free ride. What I'm saying is maybe you could structure the deal a little differently so it's backloaded instead of having higher costs up front for the franchisee. Maybe you can delay some of those costs or payments so that they can get the actual physical unit open and operating. I think there's also this idea of reinvesting in people, right? So if you have trained them well and they are operating as a sophisticated franchisee, layering some additional leadership training on top of that and helping them understand how the differences in running one unit and two is exponential. 2 to 5 is another leap, and beyond 5 is another one right there. So helping them understand the types of systems they will need internally for their own business, helping them understand how to scale their people and grow their people from within, because frankly, that's the magic sauce right there. If you teach a single unit franchisee how to develop and cultivate talent for their flywheel for management from within their own organization, you've just really done something to move the needle for them, because you're not just investing in them, but you're helping them invest in their people too. So there's several layers to that. It's a little complex, I'm not going to lie, but I am deeply appreciative of the brands that are taking steps and working with us to help change the face of what their franchisee system looks like by reinvesting in their own franchisees and their people.
Would it be appropriate to ask you for a few names? Because because I think what we're desperate for, what we really need, is some real clear examples of what this stuff looks like on the ground. Because to be talking is great, but to see something in action is really powerful.
Yeah, so I will give you some examples of brands I think that are doing well without respect to Full Course's involvement. So one of them is Jersey Mike's. I think Jersey Mike's is doing a lot to highlight the success of some of their multi-unit franchisees, to shepherd their franchisees to grow as multi-unit operators. I'm super impressed with that system. And Yum Brands has a whole educational program that's designed to cultivate diverse franchisees, first-time franchisees. They have done a phenomenal job in funding that and partnering with the University of Louisville, to house that entire education program. So there are brands out there who are taking steps to reinvest in their franchisees and their education and their betterment. And I want to applaud all of them. I think, we've seen a lot of movement in this direction, especially with the sort of wake up call that we got during the pandemic. I don't think we could avoid this anymore. But Full Course does regularly work with brands. And look, from where I sit, I could care less if it's identified as a Full Course product or not. What I care about is that brand is taking that step to make that investment. I want them to do what we do when we invest in brands and grow franchise systems. I want them to have all of those tools that we use to help develop their own folks, because the more of us that invest back in people, the better this industry will be in the end. And I think the faster we'll get there.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, interesting too how you were speaking about not to jump all over the place, but I just wanted to make sure we touched on this, is that concept of going from one location to two, and 2 to 5, and 5 to 10. I mean, I've had this discussion, not in terms of specifically franchising, but just that management ladder that people climb. When I was a night manager getting promoted to a GM, I thought that was a big leap, right? And I was going like, this is crazy. Now I'm in charge of the whole thing. When I went from GM to district, that was a whole nother, because so I tell people all the time, and Adam, I know you spend lots of time with chefs moving forward in their careers and trying to take on more responsibility and grow. That's the biggest leap I find for people, is the one unit to multi-unit, whether it's management or franchise. That's a big jump.
Yes, and so we have a course, obviously specifically designed to teach these issues,
Mhm.
and it's all the things you wouldn't think about, right? Suddenly
Yeah.
you get over 50 employees, you trigger different HR accountability and different other, right? So the stuff that kind of gets in the way will end up kind of clogging up the machine. And what I often see is when someone goes from one unit to two, they still keep trying to wear all the hats. But there are some hats that are appropriate to hand off, whether with a very sophisticated vendor, a part-time employee, et cetera. So it's about knowing when to let go and knowing where the high risk areas are in the business as you're growing and what the appropriate steps are to take so that you can be more scalable. Because what I don't want to see is that what we know happens when it's the burnout, the entrepreneur burnout,
Mm.
where they say, I can't do anymore, I'm not scalable, is usually when they give up and call us, right? It's somewhere between unit 2 and 3, sometimes 3 or 4, because at that point you can get away with kind of holding all the lids on the pots and shuffling the stuff on the stove, and you probably haven't burned out yet, but you're about to.
Yeah.
And so really teaching entrepreneurs in this space what to let go of, who to give it to, and when to do it is the secret sauce, right? You have to not all do it at once. We don't want to load you up with overhead that's unnecessary. So between units 2 and 3, there's some back office stuff that we really highly recommend, whether that's accounting, outsourcing your HR, et cetera. And those gain you extra speed when you go from unit 3 to 7, right? So we're kind of priming the engine a little bit for growth, even as we're giving you more breathing room to grow yourself.
Yeah, Chris is just typing in multi-unit management is not simply GM on steroids. It's a different skill set that many do not get trained properly on, and then they struggle. And to your point, Lauren, then there's the burnout. No, I mean nobody likes doing a shitty job, but if you've never been provided that skill set, then speaking for myself, it's kind of a gray place, a dark place to be when you really want to do a great job, but don't necessarily have access to the tools. And so I have two questions for you. Number one, it was more of a statement. So if you haven't checked out fullcourse.com, you really should, as an operator, as a chef, as a team leader, whatever it is. I was just on your educational page, and your programs are going for like $99, $39, create positive culture, $35. They're video courses. I mean, you don't necessarily need to be flush in order to use these assets, whether or not you go for full course or you team up with a local hospitality school, or there's all kinds of places to go to get this type of information to be able to support your staff. And, I've always felt that job number one for a manager or a team leader is to develop, number one, a safe and equitable culture with which they can do their job. And the other part is to develop and deepen relationship, period. Mm-hmm. And everything else is just a detail to that point. And so when you talked earlier about, identifying and cultivating talent, to me, that landed very, very powerfully, because the deeper you can go with succession plans and scripting where, everybody has a clear trajectory through the operation, and then layer that training in so that they always feel competent when they make it jump from here to here is priceless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll add this. I see this awesome. We would have high potential folks in our restaurants all the time and identify them very quickly and try and put them into our management track, that we had developed internally, because we were growing restaurants so quickly. I did 8 openings in 20 months. I mean, I was constantly sourcing talent. It was just constant. And, one of the things that struck me were, absent my example of, making a career in restaurants, a lot of these folks would not have considered a longer career than just an hourly wage position. Mm-hmm. And part of me being vocal in my story and sharing my journey, and frankly, that of my team as well, we're all former operators. We're industry executives. We are a great example of all of the different kinds of careers that you can have in the restaurant industry. And I want to make it a great place to work. I just don't want to be the stopover air quotes here, first job that everybody's had. I really want to help highlight all these amazing ways that you can create a fulfilling career in our industry. And I think that's part of what we're missing. We had a little egg on our face, but the truth is the pandemic didn't do that. 79% of operators reported being understaffed in 2019.
Yep.
And I was one of them. This is a true story. One of our units was really struggling. We had burned through 2 managers in a very short period of time. And I was about to go get married. I had a scheduled date. I had to be out of town getting married. And I ended up the general manager of one of our units. Here we are in a multi-million-dollar company. This is a true story. We could not train up someone fast enough. And this one unit that we had we called it the bucking bronco, man. It was crushing volume, just an absolute grind at lunch. And it was a hard one to master. And I looked at my partners and I said, I'm going to get it done. We're not going to drop the ball. And they're like, but Lauren, you're running ops and development. I'm like, I'll handle it. And it was so brutal. And that's so much of that experience that I had informs why we take these positions as full course, because I know what it's like to not have someone run a shift for you for 3 weeks while you're frantically training up a new manager, right? So I really believe that this is a magic bullet here. And I don't want to simplify it, but it's so simple. It's investment in people, and it's investment in your chain of command. Everyone in the restaurant who has talent and wants to learn is capable, right? It's more than just cross-training them and on-the-job training. We have to invest in them and their professional and personal betterment.
Well said. I think, yeah, again, I said this earlier, but you guys, what you're doing is just so appropriate, I think, for our industry, because there's 1,000 examples going through my mind right now about, exactly what you just said, that the bucking bronco example, where you're trying to hold on to things that are happening in the restaurant while you're trying to manage all these others and train people at the same time and find the next rising star. It's it can be a lot for people. So,
well, let's talk about that, Jen. Like, there isn't often a lot of time to do on-the-job training. The other issues with on-the-job training. So if you're short-staffed, training's the last thing that you're worried about. Like, you literally, we know this. You guys, everyone's lived this. You throw people in. It's a baptism by fire. You're like showing them while you're doing, and it's a little bit harried and frenetic. The problem with that kind of training, if you're understaffed, it's just impossible to do. 2, there's not a tremendous amount of consistency, right? How one person does it and one manager does it in one place may not be the same as another. 3, it's not how people learn. Not everyone learns that way. There are visual learners, there are tactile learners, there are audio learners. And so what we really are trying to do here is, look, I don't want to take away on-the-job training. It is necessary, but I want it to be the icing on the cake. We got the cake for you, right? So let us bake you the perfect cake. We'll put together what you need. We'll teach them how to read a P&L. We'll teach them how to do leadership, how to talk to people, how to develop culture within a restaurant. And then they can augment that with your on-the-job training. And the thing to consider here is accessibility, because I really want to hit on this. We have a tremendous amount of Hispanic and Spanish language employees in our restaurants. And I, never thought in a million years I would be the person waving this banner, but it needs to be said. It is a language barrier too. So one of the things that is high on my list this year is, we're going to keep kicking out amazing content that people need, but we're also going to be translating it into at least one other language, and that being Spanish, because I feel very strongly that we need to remove some of these barriers to upward mobility within our own opportunities in our restaurants. And that includes for those people who may not speak English as their first language.
So speaking of accessibility, is full course any state, any market, Canada? In Canada?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as we flip this stuff into Spanish, I want to push it even more deeply into Central and South America, because I think there's some opportunities for us to, again, share the playbook. I just want to share the playbook. I want this information out there. Look, we have this educational part. All of this is parked in a 501c3 nonprofit by design. My dream is that this is fully funded someday, so no one has to pay a dime for it. That's my mission. So if anyone wants to write me a check, I'm right here. We're good. I'll put your name on the door. I don't care. It's just, that's really what this is about. It costs money for us to produce this content. It costs money for us to translate it all into Spanish. I wish I had all the hours in the day I could do it myself, but I can't. So for us to continually leveling the playing field means that we're out there identifying where the gaps are. We're helping fill them with the right courses and content. And we're being proactive in the way that we're solving these problems in our industry, but that takes time and money. So right now we charge just a nominal amount so that people can help us with that. But man, that'd be a beautiful thing if we could just teach everybody for free.
Yeah. Oh, Adam, we can't hear you.
Sorry, guys. To come back to your accessibility statement, I also recognize, having worked in South Florida for 20 some years, that there was a moment where I just, called up the local extension and got folks down there for ESOL, English is a special second language, and actually had them hold classes in the restaurant on the hours that they were closed, and opened it up to everybody on the street. So it didn't matter which restaurant you worked at, but I have a Latin heritage, although my Spanish is really, really bad. But the attempt to be able to communicate in their language is viewed by associates as like a real plus. Like, at least you're making an attempt. Right? It's like going to France and trying to order a coffee in English. So like, sorry, so we ignore you until you at least try in bad French to order that. Then they're like, oh, sure, no problem, I speak English.
Yeah, and I think, Adam, in those situations, this is something that I'm adamant about. I am bilingual, but I, am very conscious about speaking Spanish in front of people who don't understand it, lest they feel excluded. So there is this natural thing that happens, and especially when you have Spanish-speaking talent in your kitchen, and it just furthers that divide between back of house and front of house, right?
True.
So I want to give all kinds of runway to those folks. I don't care if they're a dishwasher, a busser, a sous, they're bussing, they're serving tables, or they're, at the host stand. I want all of those folks to have an opportunity to better themselves through education in our industry. And I can't do that if we don't give it to them in a format they understand, whether that's language or the way that they learn, like video, audio, written content, or on the job, or some mix of those. And, here's the thing. If you are going to put language classes in your restaurant, which I have done, it's on 2 occasions with different brands that we've worked with, please do it in both directions. So have your English speakers learn Spanish, but also have your Spanish speakers learn English. And if you do that, you are really, truly being equitable in the way you propose that solution, because it's not just one way, it's both.
Excellent point. Is there something that franchises, it's like Jersey Mike's and Yum, as you pointed out, is there some takeaway that we can pull from their current successes in closing the gap and translate that to someone who's a single unit owner who's struggling to keep his P&L above water? What can he do or she do to close the gap that seems to be yawning even wider with every day that goes by?
Yeah, so I am going to say this. So as the daughter of an immigrant, I was taught that education is the key to unlocking opportunity. And so we clearly have hung our hat on that at full course. I love that we're an investment firm and we are changing the game with the way we invest in restaurants. But the most sacred and important thing we will ever do is our investment in people and the way we educate them, period. Now, all of that said, I do want to make a point here because we've talked a lot about education. Yeah. But seeing somebody who looks like you and has a story like yours succeed is incredibly powerful. And for those of us who have made it over this bridge in our careers, who are successful multi-unit operators, who have come up in careers in the industry, who have been executives, who have started companies, you have come over that bridge and worked really hard to get there, but your job is not over. You have to turn around and lift up and carry over that bridge all of the people who are coming up behind you in the next generation of leadership. That is how we make a difference in this country. It is incumbent on us to share our stories. And sometimes It's uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. It is not always easy for me to walk in and be the woman in the room. It is not always easy for me to walk in and feel like I have to wear the banner for our Hispanic culture. Because you know this, Adam, we're so wildly different even within Hispanic culture.
Oh, yeah.
But like my friends who are Mexican, totally different from my friends who are Costa Rican, etc. And my point just here is to say, if I step back and don't share my story because I feel uncomfortable carrying the banner, and I'm not even suggesting that's what it is, but it feels heavy. It feels like a heavy mantle. I'm not doing any justice to the people who just need to see an example. They just need to see that someone out there cares about them and who has worked hard to succeed. That is massive. And it's happened to me. Even at this stage in my career, I have been humbled and so motivated and empowered by other executives in our industry who are also Hispanic, who've said to me, "You're doing an awesome job. What can I do to help you? I really value what you're doing. This is so powerful." And I'm like, me? Like, what? Me? Okay. Because you fangirl a little bit on your heroes. And to me, anyone who looks like me and has a story like mine and has immigrant parents, like that lands with me and it inspires and motivates me. So what I do want to say is when you have these successes in these brands and the programs you're doing are working and you're growing multi-unit franchisees and growing leadership opportunities, track that stuff and share it. Talk about it because other brands need to see that it's working too, right? That it equates to actual results and reward for the brand. Don't be shy about sharing, please. Please share.
Man, you're eloquent.
All those years of debate team and law school, I suppose. Thank you. That was very kind.
Listen, this conversation is so juicy, and we could go on for a lot longer, but we want to be appreciative of everybody's time and our listeners and viewers, and thanks very much for Chris for your comment, and Doug, your enthusiasm. We're going to actually end this broadcast right now, but we're actually going to go into another studio and record some bonus content that will only be available tomorrow when we do our recap of the show and put the bullet notes in there. So you want to look for that post because there's going to be some free bonus content where Lauren is really going to kind of like she is. She's just going to lay it out for us. 1, 2, 3. What can we do to close the gap? So join us there. Thank you very much, Lauren, Jim. Viewers, listeners, thank you so much for your time. This has been another episode of Turning the Table, and we'll see you next Thursday here on the Turning the Table podcast page at 12 noon Eastern. Thank you.